Hello, and welcome back to perhaps the most important video in EssayMaster's undergrad essay course. Today, we're going to talk about the most critical essay of all, the personal statement that you'll be writing for the Common App or Coalition app. Let's get right to it. So as a reminder, your personal statement, more than any other essay, is your chance to show your dream school who you are. It's admittedly a really broad statement, but you can narrow it down some by thinking about what this is not asking for. Not what you want to do at your dream school, not your activities, but rather who you are as reflected through your experiences. But even still, this is an enormous question. So, how do you start? Well, simply enough, just by knowing what to brainstorm. Start with, who am I? Just jot down for 5 to 10 minutes whatever comes to mind. In the brainstorming phase, it's really important to emphasize there are no wrong answers here. You may come up with 30 ideas, but since you'll only use one, it's okay if 25 of them are terrible. This is less about having the perfect idea on your first try and more about brain dumping everything out so you can make sense of what your options are. You can also ask yourself, what would I want someone to most know about me? This is a great way to evaluate what you care about most to the forefront. You'll likely find yourself passionate about it and excited about it, which always makes for a great essay. And finally, you can ask, what activity, trait, or event most defines me? Again, there's no real wrong answer here. We've seen essays talking about everything from drawing an eagle to STEM projects that have gotten students into really prestigious schools. It's less about what you write about and more about what it shows for you. With that said, here are some things to keep in mind and things to avoid as you work on these. One, stand out with your story. The thing to emphasize here is your story. We may sound like a broken record, but we can't emphasize enough how much of a personal statement this needs to be. With that said, though, don't try and stand out for its own sake. What we mean here is that a lot of times we hear people ask, is this essay topic too cliche? Well, it's good to not write, for example, a generalized essay about a sick relative. Choosing to write about something extreme, like the time you went solo skydiving with no backup parachute because it sounds cool or different, is equally bad. If it's not personal to you, we can promise it's not interesting to your dream school. In a similar vein, pick what matters to you. I personally have gone skydiving. I really enjoyed skydiving, but it's not something that really matters to me on a deep level. So if I were writing this essay, I wouldn't write about skydiving. If skydiving, on the other hand, does mean something really deep to you, go for it. But don't pick what you think is different. One of the best essays I ever read was about caring for a sick uncle. Is it common and cliche to talk about a sick relative? Well, sure, but the details and the personal nature of the essay made it blow past concerns about that cliche. So don't be different just for the sake of being different. When you're coming up with your ideas, we recommend brainstorming at least 10. I know I mentioned earlier in the video coming up with 30 ideas, and while more is better in the brainstorming and brain dumping phase, having at least 10 will be a good enough starting point to unearth one or two golden ideas. But with that said, don't ever talk about romance or criminal activity. There really aren't many taboo topics, but those are two that are more likely to just lead to awkward stories than genuinely personal or interesting ones. So, with that said, now let's provide a good and a bad example of an opening paragraph, a body paragraph, and a closing paragraph. We'll start with how not to write an opening paragraph. This example right here, for example, reads, this year, I learned that time heals all wounds. I went through some difficult times, but I've emerged stronger and a better person. This is the story of how I went through difficulties to become this person. Well, if you're thinking this is really simple, there's no way anyone writes like this. Actually, we do see a lot of people write like this. And it doesn't work for three big reasons. One, time heals all wounds is a cliche and it can apply to anyone and everyone. So if you write something and you realize that it could apply to anyone that you know, it's probably not worth keeping. Two, there's no specificity for who this is. If you read this text as a whole, It could apply to anyone you know, and that's not a good thing. And finally, we just want the story. Don't set it up with text like, this is how, show us, don't tell us. Now, with that said, here's how to write a good opening paragraph. This one says, I stood frozen in the produce aisle at ShopRite, wondering which of the 5 varieties of oranges to buy. Valencia, blood orange, organic, Florida navel. What were the differences? When I asked my mom which variety she was looking for, she responded curtly, it's your choice. Pick what you want. The thing was, I didn't know what I wanted. Now, immediately, we have a much stronger sense of this person. The vivid descriptions of oranges and being in the produce aisle puts us, as the readers, in the scene. We get hints of the author's relationship with his mother, and while you don't want to hint at things over literally all 650 words, doing so early in front of the majority of the essay can keep the reader moving along. We also like the use of the specific to broaden out to the bigger picture, as is the case here of using this anecdote at ShopRite to embody a bigger lesson about the writer's relationship with his mother. Once you get into the body of your essay, it's easy to fall into some particular traps. This one includes some of them. It reads, in junior year, I averaged 15 points a game and 6 rebounds and made all conference. In my senior year so far, I have averaged 20 points and 12 rebounds and have received recruiting offers. This shows my growth, not just in terms of on-court production, but in off-court growth. One thing we really want to emphasize, your personal statement can tell a story that takes place within something from your activities list, but it should not be a paragraph listing of your activities. This essay would have been much more interesting if, for example, the writer had talked about how a critical failure or moment of realization during a particular game had affected him. The result of making this a statistical recap is that there's no real story, and when there's no story, there's no real interest. Accordingly, claims like this shows my growth feels unearned. It's one thing to hint at, but when you have no connection established, it doesn't feel cohesive. On the other hand, this body paragraph works well. It reads, quote, no, 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 you're doing it all wrong. The secret to developing realistic drawings lies in your ability to study every nuance of the object in front of you, my art teacher advised. Try sketching with one eye closed. It's all about perspective, people. We really love the use of dialogue, and while you don't have to use dialogue in your essay, it's pretty much always an effective way to show in your story. There's also something to be said for a conflict building toward the climatic moment of realization. Here, we can feel failure starting to hit, but there's also a hint of a way forward to a bigger realization. This also hints at the lesson learned beyond the practical one of sketching with one eye closed, as evidenced by the words, it's all about perspective, people. When it comes time to end your essay, ending it can be really difficult. As a general rule, we like to say, bring it back full circle, but doing that is obviously easier said than done. Here's how not to do it. In conclusion, I would like to attend Stanford because it is the best school for my entrepreneurial dreams. I have learned much about my ambitions, and Stanford is the best place to realize them. Thank you for your consideration. For one, this essay is about you, not whatever school you're applying to. Yes, Stanford is a great school, but the personal statement really isn't the place to talk about it. And also, when you're using the Common App, a coalition app, you'll frequently have the same essay go to multiple schools. So it's going to be a really bad look if you apply to Harvard and your essay says Stanford. Two, there's nothing specific here. Aside from the student saying he has entrepreneurial dreams, there's nothing really detailed about this. And finally, there's no need to break the fourth wall. Let the essay speak for itself and save your word count for things about you and your story. On the other hand, here's a strong ending to an essay. It reads, when class ended each afternoon, I would cap my blue dry erase marker, give high fives to the students as they walked out the door, and watch as their parents picked them up. I was confident that when my students were asked the inevitable questions of, did you learn something today? and did you have fun, their answers would be a resounding yes. And even as their teacher, I learned and had fun too. Once again, vivid details like quotes and blue dry erase marker can place us in the scene. There's a specific reflection about how, as the teacher, she learned and had fun too. And finally, this is really to the point. The story really only ends with the penultimate sentence, and the reflection part is really only in the last sentence. In this case, less truly is more. So really spend some time on your personal statement and make sure you get it right, because it really is the most important essay of all. But once you're confident about it and once you feel satisfied with it, we can move on to the next most common essay, the why school or the why major essay.